That is why I'm very concerned, I guess I would say, about BlackRock in particular, because they seem to be the people that the government turns to, regardless of whether a Democrat or a Republican is in office. And, they have sort of a history of really affecting wealth transfers during these crises at a time when, they're supposedly developing or helping develop policy meant to bail out Main Street. They end up sort of affecting massive bailouts for Wall Streets. And of course, the people that BlackRock are trying to generate profits for ultimately.
Whitney Webb shares the intricacies of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, discussing their potential risks and implications. She explores how stable coins like Circle could interact with and impact the valuation of Bitcoin additionally. Whitney sheds light on the significant role of BlackRock in shaping the financial landscape. At the time of this discussion, Bitcoin's price hovers around $58,000, showing a modest 1% increase in the last 24 hours, contrasted with a 1% decrease over the past week.
It's pretty clear that whoever is the next president is going to have to deal with some sort of U.S. government debt crisis. And I'm concerned about how that response is going to be, regardless of which candidate wins. So, for example, Trump, in his case, when there was a major economic crisis in the form of, what happened economically as a result of lockdown policy and because of COVID-19, the person that he and his administration reached out to was Larry Fink of BlackRock, who implemented something we can get into later that some researchers have called the going direct reset, which was basically a way to put money from QE directly in the hands of the private sector instead of public entities, sort of like it had been done before. And arguably that resulted in a massive wealth transfer, and BlackRock didn't really use that money to help Main Street at all. They used it to buy shares in their own ETFs, among other things. And then Kamala, in her case, her entire economic team is essentially led by former BlackRock executives, and that was also true for the Biden administration. So essentially BlackRock, which was also played a major role in sort of developing the bailouts in the 2008 economic crisis, which was under Obama, right? Will likely be developing the response for whatever this, coming economic crisis is, regardless of who gets in office. If we look at, the policy actions of the people running who they turn to in a time of crisis or who is running their economic team, that seems increasingly likely. So, and the other thing that I'm really concerned about as it relates to, a coming economic crisis is that I think we're going to see a major effort to saddle American consumers with programmable, surveillable money and seizable money. And so, of course, a lot of people for years now have been very concerned about central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. But there are also things issued by the private sector, like stablecoins, for example, that are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs are. So I think it's very likely in the event of a major debt crisis or some sort of crisis that damages significantly regular Americans' purchasing power, there will be an effort to onboard Americans onto one of those two versions of programmable, surveillable money. So it's possible, if Kamala wins, we could see a CBDC or something like that. But in the case of Trump, he's sort of come out in favor of stablecoins. He did that recently at his speech at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year. And, stablecoins are just as programmable and surveillable and seizable as CBDCs in theory are. And I think those, as people have rightly pointed out, are a threat to our financial privacy and ultimately our financial freedom. So I think people should be focusing not just on CBDCs, but also, these other digital currencies that have the potential to offer those same, Orwellian functionalities to the people, issuing them and producing them. And some of those prominent stablecoins like Circle, for example, have major alliances with BlackRock, and BlackRock has a minority stake in them, and have, said in their some of their SEC filings that, the stablecoins can be used to manipulate the price of Bitcoin, for example. Debasement of U.S. American consumer purchasing power. But a lot of this money at a time when there were lockdowns and there was really very little economic activity going on, they're being given all of this people like BlackRock asset managers are giving all of this money, and then they go and instead of helping out Main Street, they go up and buy up all the assets. They buy shares in their own ETFs, for example. And basically what happened during COVID was a massive wealth transfer. And if you look at the statistics of it, the top 1% in the United States benefited hugely during COVID, but the rest of us did not. Maybe some people got stimulus in that, but a lot of the consequences downstream of those policies have resulted in this inflationary situation we're in, and a lot of other, economic issues that people are dealing with. And so BlackRock sort of, I would argue, oversaw, these wealth transfers sort of, to the benefit of Wall Street and not Main Street. And it seems like, if there is another crisis coming down the pike, which it seems there is, BlackRock is likely to do essentially the same thing, whatever policy they help design. And it really should be a point of public discussion why BlackRock has so much influence over what the Treasury Department does or what the Federal Reserve does. And really, as far as U.S. COVID fiscal policy is concerned, which, by the way, even though that was started under Trump, a lot of this continued through into the Biden administration, who, again, Biden's top economic people are former BlackRock executives. Why is this particular asset manager on Wall Street so embedded with the development of U.S. fiscal policy, which at times when that fiscal policy is meant to help regular Americans, it has not been doing that when BlackRock is involved. And really, this is something that most Americans don't even know happened,
As we just heard, Whitney Webb discusses the economic implications and significant privacy concerns associated with central bank digital currencies. She highlights how these digital currencies could enable UN unprecedented governmental oversight and control, reshaping personal finance management. Whitney goes into the nuances of how governments might utilize CBDCs to monitor and influence spending behaviors, presenting a critical view on the erosion of financial privacy. Additionally, she critiques the integration of blockchain technology into mainstream finance, emphasizing the need for a delicate balance between innovation and regulation. This balance, she argues, is crucial to safeguard individual freedoms while fostering technological advancement. Let's hear more from Whitney Webb as she elaborates on these pressing issues.
Yeah, I think debt is a very real and serious issue. And the amount of debt the U.S. government has accrued, I think, is a testament to the poor fiscal management of the U.S. government, and not just the executive branch, but Congress as well. And it's been going on for a very, very very long time, and not a lot has been done about it. And really, in the post 9/11 era, the amount of debt that, the U.S. government has taken on has just absolutely ballooned when you compare it to previous decades. And I think a lot of that has to do with the foreign wars that the U.S. government has engaged in, including ones that aren't formally declared, in this sort of effort to expand, the military empire abroad and sort of maintain that hegemony and dominance. And historically, a lot of that was also directly related to dollar hegemony. The petrodollar system, which now we know has essentially been on the way out. But a colleague of mine, Mark Goodwin, put out a book a few years ago about this idea of the Bitcoin dollar system, and this idea that the US government would sort of use Bitcoin and create the system that's like an analog to the petrodollar system, where, because most people, when Bitcoin is purchased, usually it's done with, by buying dollars first. In order to purchase Bitcoin, for example. And in that type of situation, you'd be just like in the case of, the petrodollar, where, the price of oil it's priced in dollars. You're generating artificial demand for dollars to buy some sort of energy commodity or energy asset. And Bitcoin sort of is an energy asset at the end of the day. It's moving, essentially attempting to create the same system, but instead of with oil, with Bitcoin. And most of the Bitcoin holdings in the world are concentrated in the United States, and the US government itself is one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world. So I think there's sort of this effort there to do that. And this was actually implicit in Trump's speech that he gave at the Bitcoin conference a few months ago, sort of saying that's what he sort of saw utility in Bitcoin for, in a sense. And but I think also that has a lot of causes a lot of complications when it relates to the ethos of Bitcoin, which was originally about stopping irresponsible central bank policy and fiscal policy. The idea that you would yoke Bitcoin to the US dollar instead of using it to challenge the US dollar or challenge fiat or challenge debt-based currency or a debt-based monetary system. Obviously, if you join, the US dollar to Bitcoin, having Bitcoin be a challenge to those things essentially kind of has to stop. And really, in that situation, you could have Bitcoin enable that type of irresponsible fiscal policy because you could, you would essentially be using it as a sink for hyperinflation at the end of the day. So essentially, if you were to like hyperinflate the dollar in this type of system, obviously the price of Bitcoin would appreciate as price in US dollars, but it's not, but Bitcoin itself isn't subject to inflation. So the people that hold Bitcoin in that case would really benefit in that type of scenario, but people that hold, dollars, for example, would not necessarily. But there's also this effort to sort of resolve this that aspect of it by bringing stable coins into the equation, which are digital dollars, but they're kind of gobbling up US treasuries and are buying sort of like nation state level amount of US government debt and servicing the debt at the same time. So sort of the Bitcoin dollar system, as I understand it. And again, this is Mark Goodwin's work. So again, he can probably explain it a lot better than me and the detailed mechanisms and all of that. But as I understand it, you would have to have sort of these dollar stable coins in the mix as well, as a way to sort of absorb government debt. And even, these things may not be enough to absorb all of the debt that we have. And so there's these efforts right now, this idea of real world asset tokenization. There's this push into tokenizing what is referred to as natural capital or aspects, I guess major, like even entire ecosystems essentially, and tokenizing them and using that as sort of like, a store of wealth, of finite supply. So there's this one effort, for example, that's seeking to tokenize each hectare of the Amazon rainforest. And there's 750 million hectares. So there's a finite supply of this digital asset security that's tied to each hectare of the rainforest. So then you have something else that could in theory be used as a sink for this stuff too, because when it's of a finite supply, it's it's not subject to inflation, and so you can sort of mitigate the impacts of inflation by having this anti-inflationary thing because of its finite supply as a sink, for the thing that you're creating more of in the case of dollar.
Whitney Webb concludes her discussion by emphasizing the profound implications central bank digital currencies could have on global economics and individual privacy. Webb's insights compel us to engage actively in shaping our financial future. We would love to hear your thoughts on some questions. How will these innovations affect our financial autonomy? What can we do to ensure a balance between innovation and regulation? Like and subscribe to bring good luck and blessings for your financial future and get this crypto bull run going.